Hello, everybody. Welcome into the 34th edition of Texas Longhorns Live at the Voice of College Football. We do appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us. Can you do us a favor and please hit that like button? Please subscribe down below. It really helps out what we're trying to build just across the whole network. So thank you for that. Also, give us a follow on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it right there. That is my handle. And then this is Gerald's as well, along as well with his podcast that he runs with his college roommate friend. So check that out as well. So please do that over there. Also, guys, please check out the Old Miss Show every 2 p.m. Eastern time. Go over there and subscribe there. And then Mark has a call-in show, and he's doing like a daily transfer portal show. That has slowed down a little bit, but that's going to kick back up very heavily once this college football playoff ends. It's going to be rapid too, so please check out that as well. So that will do it for that portion. Let's jump right into this. Texas wins 38-24. Let's recap this game real quick. So, Gerald, what are some things that you saw on offense that you liked and are hoping, obviously, that continue to go forward?
I mean, the easy answer, right, is the running game, right? And Clemson, we said it before the game. Clemson folks said it before the game. Like, the Clemson run defense isn't that great, but ultimately, like, they're pretty talented. And outside of Georgia, they're probably the most talented defense Texas has played this year. And Texas had its way with them on the ground. The outside zone was hitting. I mean, Jaden Blue cracked two rushes for like 111 yards, 112 yards on two big runs, on two big touchdown runs. So, like, that's a massive win for Texas. I don't know if they'll get pushing 300 yards against every opponent, but if they can get 200 yards rushing. I mean, really, that's the way that the offense goes. If the running game is going, the offense is usually really good. The two games this year, it didn't get going. The two Georgia games, the two losses. So, like, that to me is the biggest issue. Now, Sark said in his presser today that Cam Williams, his knee is better than we hoped, which is good. And again, he also said that Jake Majors probably could have gone back in against Clemson if they needed him to. So, the offensive line, notwithstanding, Trevor Gooseby did a really good job in relief for Cam Williams on Saturday against Clemson. So, like, the run game was exactly what it needed to be. And Quinn Ewers, frankly, avoided the backbreaking turnovers. Like, he had the one interception, but it wasn't his fault. He played within the offense, played confidently, pushed the ball downfield, not as much as he did a couple of weeks ago against Georgia, but pushed the ball down the field, found his receivers. No drops in this game, which was good. So, like, it just felt like they cleaned up a lot of the stuff that plagued them against Georgia in the SEC championship game.
No, and I agree. And it's funny, a couple of weeks ago I said I'd be interested to see if Cameron Williams went out, how Trevor Gooseby would slide into the right tackle position. I had a theory that maybe he'd be just as good or if not better. I think there really wasn't that much drop-off to when he came into the game, and he was the second highest rated, according to Pro Football Focus, in the SEC championship game, and he was one of the highest rated offensive linemen again sliding in. So he's going to be really good next year. I think Cameron Williams was road grading people early in this game, though. Both him and Banks are getting after it. I have a stat here. CJ Vogel tweeted this out. This is pretty crazy. 14 carries, 115 yards on runs to the right side of the offensive lineman. So the right guard and right tackle were getting movement there. And that honestly has been the weak portion of the Texas offensive line in pass protection and in the run game. So that's really good to see that they're doing it, the dirty work there in the run game. And that's a combination of Cameron Williams and Trevor Gooseby's time. So we really didn't miss much there, and really good job by those guys. It's going to be interesting what the Cameron Williams injury is. Again, they don't have reports on injuries for the college football playoff, which I don't really like. I think that should be added. That makes no sense to me. But I'm interested to see what that is. And you could tell just by the way Majors was on the sideline hanging out, chilling with people, talking. Like, he definitely could have gone back in. I'm fine with them holding him out at that point. The only thing I noticed from Hayden Conner sliding into center, there are a couple low snaps. That's about it. But as long as your quarterback can catch him, that's all I need. I don't need Seth McLaughlin out there with the Alabama where he's bouncing the snaps. That's disaster waiting to happen, but he wasn't doing that. Were they perfect? No, but good enough. And then Kelvin Banks was phenomenal in this game. Again, according to Pro Football Focus, he didn't allow any pressures or sacks. Typical Kelvin Banks, played very well. And these 10 days are going to help him even more. You have 10 games to get better. I think it's going to help out Isaiah Bond too. I think there's a decent chance you see Isaiah Bond, because at that point it would be for about a month or even a little bit longer since he played last. To me, that should be enough, hopefully, to get on the field. Again, if he's not like 90+%, don't play him in this game. I don't think we need him, honestly, and we'll get into that later when we preview Arizona State. But it was nice to see this offense get the run game going. And this is the thing. I still don't know if the question has been answered. Is it a Georgia thing with the run game, or is it definitely is part of it, or is it who we're playing to? Because is Clemson a great defense? No, they were 8th in the ACC against the run, which the ACC as a whole isn't a very good conference. So if you're 8th and gets run in that conference, you're probably not that good at stopping the run. My question will be answered when we play the Ohio State, the Oregon, if we do win this Arizona State game. But it is nice to see it going. But it's been going. Like if you look at it, it went the last month of the season. It was going versus Kentucky. It was going versus A&M, and it was going versus any other team before that other than Georgia. It's really been going. So it's nice to see that it's starting to lean and look like it is a Georgia issue, and we may have to solve that later on if we do play them again. But it's nice to see it got going into this game.
Yeah, and I mean, let's just be real. Everybody in the country will likely, I say that, there are a lot of other teams that will also have a Georgia issue. It's not just unique to Texas. I think the Texas issue of Georgia is unique. But Georgia, even though they're not last year's Georgia or 2 years ago Georgia, they're still the Georgia freaking Bulldogs. And Kirby Smart is still their coach. But not to harp on the run game too much, but I think the stat that jumped out to me is that Texas was just gashing them in the run. 8 running plays longer than 10 yards, 216 yards on those big chunk runs. That is massive. Now, you're not going to do that every week, but if you get 5-6 yards a rush, that's first down. That's a first down every 2 rushes, right? So that's enough to get the job done. And if the running game is going, that opens up the play action. We saw Texas do a lot of great work in the play action in this game. A lot of those linebackers just freezing and allowing a wide receiver or a tight end, Gunnar Helm, to have the 1 or 2 steps they need to create that space. And there were spots where Texas had and even missed on some things. The one throw that I think everybody takes issue with on Quinn Ewers, that crossing route to Matthew Golden, that he put the ball maybe 2 yards behind him instead of 2 yards in front of him and letting him run into it. If that ball goes a different way, the final score looks probably different for the game. So even in a game where Texas looked pretty dominant, there was still meat left on the bone, which it's less frustrating when Texas wins by 2 scores instead of loses by 2 scores. But still, this was a good win. Not, the health issues aside, it's a good win with stuff to coach, and I don't mind that.
Yeah, 100%. Texas has yet to play its A game. I don't know if you'll get that from this team. That just may be part of the recipe this year is you don't get that A game, which, again, it's the 2 separate mind things. If we don't get our A game versus Oregon, Ohio State, we're probably not winning that game, but we'll beat Arizona State with our B- game. We'll beat them with a C+ game even. So just take what this team is at this point, enjoy it. And Quinn, I'll touch on that. I thought he was good in this game. 17-24, 202 yards. Only interception was off the DeAndre Moore drop, and Karam's there was no one near him. So, of course, that Karam's 5 yards forward, and 2 guys almost pick it off. I forget who ended up picking it off, but then you get the blindside block there. And that's something, too. Someone mentioned this, and I agree with it. Most of the interceptions that Karam off of guys are when they're coming out of their breaks. When they're coming out of the breaks of the route, they're not catching the ball for whatever reason. They drop it, and that needs to be addressed because that's the thing that Quinn is best at, is throwing with anticipation and throwing right when they come out of the breaks of the route. So they have to get better at that. And DeAndre Moore has struggled the last 2 games. He's dropped 3 or 4 passes. The wide receivers as a whole, we've dropped, I think, 8 passes the last 2 games or 7 passes the last 2 games. You can't be doing that. That's something that's new, too. That's not something that has been happening throughout the whole season. That's just the last 2 games, so that definitely needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and it's weird they didn't chart that, at least the game stats that the team puts out. They didn't chart that as a drop, which is weird, but that is very clearly a drop. I'm not sure why, but that I would call that a drop. But I think the other side of that, we've talked about the offensive quite a bit, but when you think about that game and the performance Texas put up, the defense was just the run defense specifically. I think Clemson did not have its A game. They were down 2 running backs most of the game, but when push comes to shove, when you hold somebody on goal to go 4 straight plays to essentially cinch the game for yourselves, that's a major win. That's a culture play. That's a defensive play. And it harkens back to something I talked about after the first game where Texas was up 50-something points on Colorado State. It was nope, we're not letting them in our end zone. That's the same type of culture that gets that 4th and 1 stop in a college football playoffs. That to me is huge. The defense, the secondary, Clemson found something they liked, and let's be real, Texas will potentially play Dylan Gabriel in a couple of weeks. So, but until that point, Cade Klubnik is far and away the best quarterback they faced, and he was able to do some stuff against his secondary, which is something that the red flags go up a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. We can touch on that now. Like Malik Muhammad, and I was interested to see the stats. So he was targeted 8 times, 6 receptions for 120 yards. Cade Klubnik threw it for a 336 yards. So a third of the receiving yards came on Malik Muhammad. You got to be better than that. And he's had his, like, I know we haven't played the most dynamic offenses, but I've seen that all year. He hasn't been the same guy as he was last year. He's been fine, but he hasn't been, Manny Island or Muhammad Island or whatever people want to call it out there. He's just not that guy this year for whatever reason. Call it a sophomore slump or whatever you will. But he was getting exposed. Like either way, like what was happening to me, what I saw is he was either setting up too far back, and then guys, when they ran like dig routes, he didn't bite on it quick enough. And they just hit him. And then when he was too far up, he was too slow to react when they hit him on the deep routes. So something's got to change there. And then Jalen Gilbo quietly got benched for a portion of this game. Like he did not play a good game either. He did come back in later, but they benched for a couple series because he was struggling. And you could tell they were frustrated out with the linebackers and back end. There were a lot of arguments between the players, like looking at each other like, what the hell are you doing, basically? And that was from the jump, from that first drive, when you see that mesh crossing pattern thing. Everyone's like turns and looks like, what are you doing here? And I think it was Jalen Gilbo who got caught up in that. So that's got to get fixed. We actually at one point slid Jahdae Barron back into his nickel spot, and he's fine. He's definitely not the issue, but Jalen Gilbo and Malik Muhammad need to look at the tape hard, because if they struggle like that versus, again, in Ohio State and Oregon, it's going to be even a longer day, because those wide receivers with the quarterbacks they're playing at the rate they're playing right now would definitely struggle.
Yeah, it's something to watch, something to monitor. I did not expect that from Manny Muhammad. I'm not sure what it was, but they've got to get it cleaned up. And again, Cade Klubnik is an NFL quarterback. So we're not going to also say Cade Klubnik could very well be a very good NFL quarterback when it's all said and done. He's got a very NFL friendly skill set. He's able to reset the pocket and move with his feet. And he's got a great arm throwing it downfield. So we very well could be looking at one of the better quarterbacks in this in the coming draft class. So you have to throw that caveat there. But either way, Dillon Gabriel, one of the most experienced player in the country, I'll basically say at this point. He's been starting for at least 2 presidential administrations. So he's got all that experience. And then Ohio State's got a ton of firepower. So if Texas gets past Arizona State, they've got something similar on the horizon to look out for.
Yeah, 100%. And, we don't give up explosive plays, but I believe Clemson hit us for 8 explosive plays through the passing game, which is by far the most we've given up versus anyone. And I'm fine with, if that was 4 or 5, I think that's reasonable, but 8 to me was a little bit too much, even though this is the best wide receivers and quarterback we faced. I will say this though, piggybacking off your point, when we played Michael Penix in Washington last year, he threw for, I believe, 11.1 yards per attempt, which is an outrageous number. Cade Klubnik threw for 7.8. So that's a gigantic difference. Now, do I think Cade Klubnik is quite as good as Michael Penix? No. And do I think their weapons are nearly as good as Michael Penix? No. But let's say that accounts for 1 of those yards. You're still giving up 3 yards per attempt less than you would have. That's still pretty good and an improvement. Now, do I think this is an all-time great secondary after this game? No, they're not. They still have holes, and Malik Muhammad definitely, again, has to figure it out. But overall, I thought the defense played pretty well. And a shout-out to Bill Norton. I've shouted him out a couple times in the A&M game. I shouted him versus the SEC in the SEC championship game. He's played phenomenally in the 10 to 20 snaps he gets. He's very good at submarining on those 3rd and 4th down stops. He just blows it up there and allows the edges to come in and clean it up.
I mean, you cannot beat that. You cannot beat a guy who the space eaters, right? The guys are just, I'm going to sit my big fat behind down in the middle of this formation and blow it up. Cause you to either try to go over the top and get blown up by a linebacker, or to cut outside and go away from your blockers. That is perfection. And that's a big part of the reason why Texas was able to come up with that 4th down stop. Was Bill Norton was nope, I'm going to be the low man here. I'm going to be the low man. Low man wins. I'm going to just take up all the space I can and let the playmakers make plays. And those are the things that don't show up on the stat sheet. But my friend, Kyle, the guy who I host the podcast with, and we watched the game together on Saturday, and we both were like, Bill Norton did it on that drive. Bill Norton did it. And, we say his name like Bill Brasky from the old Saturday Night Live commercial or the old Saturday Night Live sketch. It was Bill Norton day all day on Saturday. It was great to see.
Yeah, he's been really good at just doing his job, honestly. And that's why this defense has been so good, is because as individuals, they do what they're supposed to, and then they communicate with the others of what their job is, and they do it well. I thought there were some breakdowns, but overall, pretty good game. It was versus the best competition we played quarterback and wide receiver wise. And that's the thing too. The first time you see it should be the hardest. So from here on out, you should get like incrementally better when you do face it. Because this week too, like Arizona, I think Sam Levitt's probably the second best quarterback we're going to face. He's pretty damn good. Like he's like a lesser version of Cade Klubnik. He's accurate. He's got a decent arm and he can move around. So we're going to get challenged a little bit. They don't have the wide receivers with Jordan Tyson out that Clemson does, but this will be another challenge. Again, the second best quarterback you'll face. And then when we play Ohio State or Oregon, that's either going to be the first or second or third, debatably, best quarterback you face. You're playing good competition, good quarterbacks. Honestly, if we get the national championship game, that will probably be, if it's Notre Dame or Georgia, that will probably be the worst quarterback we faced on the run here. So
it'll be a step down for sure.
Yeah. Now Penn State's another thing. I like Drew Allen. I think he's good, so that'd be interesting. But just get a slightly better. That's all I'm asking. Like Manny Muhammad, do I expect you to coming to this game? I think his best game was like 43 yards given up. I don't expect that when you're playing this competition, but can you cut it down to 70? Cut it down to 70, 80. I can live with that. Over 100 is just a little bit too much. A little bit too much there.
Don't be the guy that we can see on the broadcast that's getting picked on. Like that's like I've never seen Manny Muhammad get picked on. He got picked on Saturday. Just don't let people be able to pick you out as getting picked on, and that's fine. Yeah.
And the last good thing I want to hit on, Jaden Blue. He got his opportunity back. This was by far the most carries he's had because, let's be honest here, he's been at the doghouse because he fumbles. Really, other than the Texas A&M game, he really didn't do much in the SEC championship game. He got like no run in that game. They used him mostly as a wide receiver in the Texas A&M game. This game, they trust him because Trey Wisner got hurt, and he delivered. He did not fumble the ball. He hit explosive plays, and he lived up to that talent level that we know he has. He's the most talented running back on this team. His issue is fumbling. If he doesn't fumble, he's amazing. So congratulations to him in the game he had.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot be like. There's nothing more to say than like he had 115 yards on two rushes. That's fans have been waiting for those explosive plays. He's been waiting. You can tell he gets frustrated when he gets that shoestring tackle. He's like, I was going to break that one, and he finally broke two of them in this game. One on right, one on kind of zone right, one on zone left. Either side of the field, he does not discriminate. But it wasn't just those plays, but like just the way that he consistently found room, found space, was able to. I was impressed, honestly, with the patience from both of the running backs. I think that's Tashard Choice and sitting behind Bijan Robinson for a little bit. Like the patience that they showed, and that's not normally Jaden Blue's strong suit, is waiting for the blocks to set up. And we can tell the difference. He was a little more patient, used his vision a little more. And when he did that, he was able to find the crease. He was able to find that one or two steps that he needs. And if he's got two steps on the edge, there's not a person on the field, or 90% of the players on the field aren't going to be able to catch him. He's faster than any geometry they could put out there. So, like, again, big ups to him for finally having the game that we all knew he had in him, because that is what we expected. I picked him as a breakout player for Texas this year because of that exact thing. He is going to be the fastest player on the field more often than not.
100%. I mean, that first run was crazy. He wasn't going anywhere near full speed, basically jogging around the edge and blew past all the Clemson defenders. Didn't even get touched on the play. Yeah. And then the other play, he's slowing down the last 20 yards, looking behind him so he doesn't get stripped.
Making sure nobody picks his pocket.
Yeah. And yeah, he's just so fun to watch. It's frustrating because it's kind of like, you know who he is to me, NBA terms? J.R. Smith. Like J.R. Smith, super like athletic, super entertaining to watch. But then you're like, brother, why are you? Sometimes you're just like so dumb. It just reminds me of the finals play of he doesn't realize that it's a tie game. He dribbles out the clock, and you're like, you are so like talented, and you do such boneheaded stuff. Jaden Blue's kind of the same. Like the dude's super talented, but he just can't get out of his own way.
Yeah, and when he's on though. When he's electric because J.R. Smith has just as many. He hit 15 threes in the fourth quarter. How did he do that? Same type of thing with Jaden Blue. When he's on, and he was on against Clemson.
Yeah, 100%. That will do it for the recap. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Also, check out the Ole Miss Show every 2 p.m. Eastern time in their channel. They do a really good job over there. And check out the Call-In Show every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, postgame. Obviously, postgame next week will be Wednesday. I believe there is a game on Tuesday night, too. I think that's Boise State and Penn State, so check that out. Also, check out the Amazon link in the description. It really helps out the buying experience and process. It puts a little bit of change in Mark's pocket, and the buying experience and process does not change. So please check that out as well. Also, check out the SEC channel over there. We do a show every week. You can catch us on your favorite audio platform as well, so please check that out. And now let's jump ahead Arizona State a little bit. Arizona State, 11-2 team. But they've only lost one game when Sam Levitt is their quarterback. I'm not even going to give them the other loss because they had Jeff Sims as their quarterback. If anyone has watched Jeff Sims is terrible. I don't understand how he still has the job. He's not good. Nebraska just got better immediately once they replaced him with Dylan Raiola, who wasn't even that good. So, but Arizona State, listen, guys, I'm going to be straight up honest here. Texas should win this game. They should cover the spread. They're a better team than Arizona State. I actually think this is a step down in competition from Clemson, honestly. And it's hard because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'm just being honest. So it is what it is. Gerald, what do you see in this team when you look ahead to Arizona State?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say two things, right? You have to be able to hold multiple thoughts in your mind. Cam Scatabo is one of the best runners in the country, period, end of sentence. Like, Cam Scatabo is one of the best runners in the country. Texas is one of the best teams at stopping the run in the country, right? And Arizona State is not equipped, like you said, especially with their star wide receiver injured, not playing in this game. They're not built to beat Texas in a way that, again, Clemson is built to beat Texas, or not built to beat Texas, but have the tools to beat Texas, right? Because Texas, let's be honest, is going to probably target, hey, Cam Scatabo, you're not going to beat us this game. They're going to really put the game on the shoulders of their quarterback and see if they can beat them through the air, right? Texas is not going to give up the big runs. And even if they do give up a couple of big runs, I don't know that Arizona State has the defense to stop what Texas wants to do on the ground. I think Texas has the offensive line to lean on Arizona State in a way that they just haven't been this year. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, just looking at what Arizona State brings to the table. Cam Scatabo would start on 99% of the teams in the country, right? Dude is a baller. Dude rightfully got some Heisman votes. Like, he should have probably gotten more, one of the best runners in the country. But I don't think Arizona State is built in a way as a team that can beat Texas. Now, I could be sitting here 10 days from now and didn't see that coming. But as it stands right now, I think Texas is just built in such a way that Arizona State does not match up well. Texas is bigger on both fronts, and that's really where the game's going to be won and lost in this one, specifically because Arizona State loves to run the ball through Cam Scatabo.
Yeah, and something just looking into this team that's crazy, Cam Scatabo is actually their second leading receiver as well. So think about that. That guy does it all for this team, like over 2,000 yards total. It's that simple. If Texas stops him, the game's over. Like, Texas is going to win the football game. Unless this guy goes for 150 plus yards total and 1 or 2 touchdowns, I don't really think Arizona State has a shot in this game. And it's just no offense to them. When you go back to the talent thing, I was curious. I just looked it up. Clemson is 5th in talent composite ranking. Texas is 4th. There was one difference. And that was the line of scrimmage. That's the thing, too. Like, the composite can tell you a little bit. But to me, when you look at teams, because Texas for the longest time had always a top 10 talent composite, but you looked at the lines of scrimmage, you're like, that's not really a top 10 talent composite when you look at the lines of scrimmage. So you got to look at that first. And Clemson does it. They have it on the offensive line more than their defensive line. They really only have one guy along the defensive line that's good at stopping the run. Everyone else is pretty bad at it. And then Arizona State is 30th. So they're not even in the same realm of talent there. So it's going to be very interesting. Like I said, I like Sam Levitt. He's thrown for a 63.2 completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 8.8 yards per attempt. He's a good player. He is the second best quarterback we will face this year. I'm very confident saying that. People, you can debate Carson Beck. To me, what I've watched and what the stats tell me, I think Sam Levitt right now is a better college quarterback than Carson Beck is. I'm not saying draft prospect. I'm not saying anything like that, but just college quarterback.
I mean, the touchdown interception ratios tell the story for me, right? One of them has 5 interceptions. One of them has, I think, twice that this season, right? And that's Sam Levitt, right? Sam Levitt only has 5 interceptions. 20. He plays within the offense. He does what they need. And I think that's going to be the X factor is he able to find Scatabo in space in the passing game? Do they take advantage of Texas's natural aggression and throw some screens, through some misdirection, run some draws? Because I have nightmares about the OU game from last year, where Texas gets too far upfield and they run quarterback draw all day, or they run a delayed running back draw. Like, those things to me are the X factors to watch, because that's a way to take away the advantage that Texas has in the trenches, is to, again, let them run past the runner and get after it. So Sam Levitt is a baller. Like, there's no two ways around it. But again, he's missing his key target, and I think Texas has a distinct advantage in the trenches. I'm just curious to see what Pete Kwiatkowski draws up, because that you give the man 2 weeks to prepare, and he's going to find a way to shut down what you want to do best. So, like, it's going to be an interesting chess match to watch. But yeah, I think I agree with you. Sam Levitt is, as it stands right now, the second best quarterback Texas. There's like the spectrum. I think like Diego Pavia and Cade Klubnik are like on the two ends of the spectrum of very similar styles. They're going to create room with their feet. They're going to push the ball downfield. And I think like those are the two, like the far two ends of the spectrum. And Sam Levitt's probably right in the middle of those two as far as talent that we've seen thus far.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to have many quarterback design runs for him, but he's going to be able to play, make plays off script. And if he does want to run, he can. He's pretty athletic. Yeah. But you're not going to have 10, 12 plays designed for him to run the football here. But I mean, they'll probably have a little bit more than they should because they know this is do or die. So you're probably going to get an extra just 2 to 3 just based on the nature of the football game.
Yeah, I mean, he's their second leading rusher, so like you got to respect.
Yeah, 100%. And Xavier Gilroy, I forget how to pronounce the last name, but he was really good or impressed me. I watched the Big 12 championship game. He had a couple touchdowns in that game, and he has stepped up in Jordan Tyson's absence. So that's definitely someone you have to respect there. It's going to be interesting. Listen, Malik Muhammad, they watch the same thing we watched. They are going to target you, period. When you are left one-on-one, they will pursue that option on the outside. And will you be able to step up? Now, do I think this guy's as good as Clemson's wide receivers? No, but he's still a good player. Like, if we're ranking wide receivers that Texas has faced, he's probably in the top 7 or 8, honestly. Like, this guy will play in the NFL from what I've seen, and there's not many guys we've played so far that are going to play in the NFL. Like, the only guys that come to mind, and I can't even say the Kentucky guys because they had no quarterback. Like, the quarterback was terrible. Brock Vandagriff was so bad in that game. So guys that had a somewhat good a quarterback, first game, I forget the wide receiver for Colorado State's name, but he's going to play in the NFL. Yeah. You have a couple guys from Georgia, which I think I would take this guy over every guy other than Bell from Georgia, honestly, because they cannot catch other than Bell. And then you have the Clemson guys. Like, he's in the top 10 for sure. So I think he'll get some yardage. The key here is just stopping those down the field shots.
Yeah, I mean, if you can keep – again, that's one thing that in the past, and I said this in our last preview, and I'm kind of eating my words now. Generally speaking, Pete Kwiatkowski teams do not give up big chunk plays. They did against Clemson. And I'm sure they're going to spend 2 weeks diagramming that and see why it happens. But ultimately, they're going to want to keep the top on the defense. They're going to want the safeties to play over top. They're going to eliminate these miscommunications that we saw. Like, if there's one, I've never seen. That's probably been the most like impressive thing from the Texas defense and from Texas overall since Steve Sarkisian took over. I guess maybe is that like they don't make the same mistakes week after week. They may make different mistakes, but they're not going to. They're the miscommunication issues from the Clemson game are not going to crop themselves up in the Arizona State game. They just won't, because that's not how this team is built. They're going to correct them. Now, again, Arizona State may find another weakness to exploit them in a different way, but those same issues aren't going to crop up in multiple games. So I anticipate the top being a little tighter on the defense.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say we have to preach of rallying to the football. We already do that anyways, but I would say 50% of the time, Cam Scatterbo, if you're going one-on-one, is going to win that. Like, that dude's huge. He's athletic. So you definitely have to pursue him with a lot of people when he does touch the football. But I'm not too worried about that. Texas has been doing that very well. It's going to be interesting how they decide to start off this game. Do they start out with a light box and basically say, Arizona State, prove to us that you can run the football? Or do they immediately say, let's stack the box and make you throw over top of us? It's going to be interesting which way they decide early on in this game. I personally would start out with the light box and see if their offensive line can get any push versus our defensive line. That's what I would do. It's going to be interesting how they decide that. Now, jumping over to the other side of the ball, what I noticed just looking at this Arizona State team, it's a really weird defense. So they rank top 30 in like yards per play, rushing and passing, but they're terrible at third down. They're 92nd in third down percentage allowed. They're 122nd in sack percentage. So they don't get after the quarterback very well. And the red zone scoring is 76. So in those key areas, they're bad, but yards per play and everything, they're in the top 30. So I don't even know how like those two play together. It's like, so you're really good on a per play yards basis, but then in key areas, you're bad. I don't understand what happens there. I don't know if they get out executed very well in those certain instances. I'm kind of confused by that, honestly.
Yeah. There is the Big 12 was such a weird league this year. It was very much a coin flip league. So I think there's some of that there as well. Like, obviously they won the Big 12, but like the average line in the Big 12 was like 3.5. And I don't know if anybody covered on a consistent basis. So like there's something to be said about just playing weird games and those coming out on the right side of those things. You know, the defense is only giving up, you look at college football data as one of the places I look for my advanced stat. They're only giving up like 3 line yards per rush, which is good, right? You want to go 3 or less on that stat. They're stuffing opponents on almost 20% of rushes. So like they're a solid front, and this is going to sound how it's going to sound. They haven't played an offensive line like Texas. They haven't played a set of running back like Texas. So there needs to be some opponent adjustment, I think, to that. And I'm curious to see. This is the best team that they're going to probably have faced this year. And that's no shot at Arizona State is the Big 12's representative in the college football playoff, right? Texas almost won the SEC, so that's just one of those things that you have to reconcile with. Is like Texas is probably going to be the best team that Arizona State faced this year. So I'm curious which one of those trends is going to hold up. If Arizona State is going to continue to only allow 3 yards per rush and stuff opponents on 3 line yards per rush and stuff opponents on 20% of the plays, or is Texas going to kind of lean on theirs, where Texas is closer to 3.2, 3.3 line yards per rush, and only getting stuff on like 15% of their plays? Like, it's going to be an interesting trend to see which one breaks.
Yeah, it's weird. There, like you said, the competition has to matter there. And then you named all those stats which they're very good at. But then again, like, why are you bad in the red zone? Why are you bad at third down? That just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't compute in my head. Yeah, because if you look at all those other stats, people in that same area are probably not anywhere near in those stats as bad. So it doesn't make any sense to me. But also, going to the point of offensive line, I think we have 3 tackles that will get drafted higher when they come out than any offensive line in the Big 12 right now. I don't think there's any offensive line in the Big 12 that no one's going as high as Kelvin Banks. No one will go as high as Cam Williams when he decides to come out. And I think Trevor Goosby, honestly, with the year and putting on a little bit more healthy weight, I think he's going to go first round or second round. So it's just a big difference there.
Baker's are also waiting in the wings. That's another guy that might end up as a first or second rounder. So you might be onto something.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. There's a big talent disparity there, and that's the one thing. The Big 12 actually has wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks that are pretty similar to the SEC and Big 10. The difference is in line play. They do not produce offensive or defensive linemen. They just don't. You don't get freaks like a Jalen Walker, a Michael Williams, a Colin Simmons. Those guys don't come to the Big 12. So I think you're going to see that in this game, and I'm just going to give a sneak peek on what I will predict next week when we do predict the game. I think this is going to look a lot like the Big 12 championship game of last year. I think that's exactly what it's going to look like. I think think about what Oklahoma State was. Decent quarterback that could run the ball very well, and they were decent on defense. What the hell's the difference between Arizona State and last year's Oklahoma State team?
A good question. I don't really know. Arizona, Chuba Hubbard and Cam Scatterbo, like there's a very 1-to-1 situation there. So I don't know. There's not much of a difference.
No, I don't think there's that much difference, and I'll just give that sneak peek of what I do predict this game, what I'm going to predict. But I'm excited to watch this game because Kenny Dillingham could be the difference. He's a very good play caller, so I will say that, and it's going to be interesting. And I think you're going to see a lot like what Sark does, where you're going to see screens, you're going to see reverses, you're going to see stuff like that from Kenny Dillingham. And that was part of the game plan anyways, but I think he knows he's outmatched, so he's going to get more creative in this game.
And I think the way to maximize the talent of Cam Scatterbo and take out some of the ability of Texas in the interior is get him on the edges, right? Throw him a screen, throw him a quick out, throw him something in the flats. And no offense to most, like any of the defenders on Texas's secondary, Jalen Gilbo right now is probably Jalen Gilbo and Johnny Barron are probably the only 2 that I trust in a one-on-one open field situation. And I don't know if they win that 100% of the time, because that's a way that Cam Scatterbo can crack off a big play. Again, throw him a screen, throw him a quick little dump off in the flats, put him one-on-one with a cornerback, and I'm going to take the running back 9 times out of 10. It's just how football works.
I might take Andrew Makuba with the running head start.
Yeah, that's fair. He's going to try to take his head off. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I agree. One-on-one, if you're just flat-footed, I don't like that matchup. And hopefully, I don't think we'll be schemed up that way, so we see that very often. But that is the Arizona State look ahead. Again, next week, we will break down the game a little bit further and predict the game. So again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. It really helps out the channel. Also, check out the Ole Miss Show every 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Ole Miss channel, and check out Mark's call-in show every Thursday, Friday, Saturday post-game, plus Sunday in the morning recapping that weekend of college football. We really appreciate that. Now, let's talk about this. This has been a hot topic because a lot of blowouts happen in the college football playoff, and there were different scenarios of discussing how you could fix the college football playoff. So I wanted to open this up for discussion. Gerald, I want some of your insight of how you would do it.
Yeah, it's tough because like college football is a sport that generally it's either going to be a tight game or a blowout. Like there are very few like 10-point games. I was Alex Kirshner from Split Zone Duo, a podcast I love. Almost 40% of college football games this year had a margin of 3 touchdowns or more. Like that's just kind of one of those things that happens in college football is that sometimes teams get blown out, and it's hard to like judge the value or the validity of a team in their entry into the playoff based upon first round results, right? It just is what it is. Like Indiana, it's like they lost by double digits, but like they won 11 of their 12 regular season games. So it's hard to adjudicate. Like they're not going to go back down in size. I think there's probably there's no sense in doing that. I think if anything, we're going to see that trend go the other direction, which it is what it is. It's a money-making thing. So I think the one caveat or one asterisk I would want to see or thing that changes, like I want them to take a look at the seeding. I want to take a look at the AQs and figure out if there's a way to maybe reseed after the first round or kind of restack after the first round to maximize those matchups. Because like, and as a Texas fan, I'm fine with how it turned out now because I think Texas has one of the relatively better draws of the college. They're not going to see, they'll see Oregon or Ohio State in the semifinals, and they won't see Georgia theoretically until the finals if it happens. So that's a great draw for Texas, but I think that's because of Texas is ranked 3rd in the CFP, but because of the AQs, they're the 5th seed. So there's something to look at there, figuring out, do we reseed it after the first round? Do we change the way AQs work? Do we just do the 1 through 12 and rank them that way? Like, I think they've got to take a look at how the rankings and the seedings are structured, because I think that played into some of the why these matchups are the way that they are. It's hard to solve because, again, are we arguing about 4 and 5? Are we arguing about 7 or 8 and 9? Are we arguing about 12 and 13? And I think either way, like, you know, we had in the 4-team era, we had TCU get blown out in the finals, right? We had OU get blown out in the opening round. We had teams that got blown out regardless of what the metric was. And we always look to like, well, they had that Ohio State Georgia game last year. Yeah, that was 2 years ago, right? But like, there were other games that were blown. It's like, it's hard to solve it because it happens every time college football happens. But I think the big thing is readjusting the AQs and reseeding after the first round to kind of create a more aligned and talent to talent bracket that they can create.
Yeah, so I have I'll start out with my weirdest one, and no one's going to agree to this. It will never happen, but I think you should close off the sport to where only the top 30 teams in recruiting rankings can make the college football playoff. I don't think we've seen this through the history of recruiting rankings. The lowest team to ever win through a 4-year class, the average was Michigan. They were 12th. So I'm even being generous with what I'm saying is 30. It also incentivized teams. Hey, for us to be able to compete, we have to spend money on our football programs. So it totally gets rid of the teams that just like, you know what, we don't care to do it. There'd be no excuse. Guys, this is an open market. You can pay as much as you want for your football team, as little as you want for your football team. It kind of reminds me of baseball. You really know who cares about winning a championship because the owner's willing to spend money. Everyone has boosters. Everyone has donors. There are teams that could spend way more money than they do. They choose not to, but then they cry about, oh, we're not included. Well, you're not included now if you change that because you decided not to spend the money. It will never happen, but I think it would help the sport. I really do, because that would incentivize the teams that say they care. They would have to prove to everyone that they care by spending the money. And there are certain schools, honestly, that couldn't do it because they don't have the money, but there's very few schools like that. If you look at most of these schools, they have the money to pay $20 to $30 million for their football team because their football team makes the money for the university. Like, that's the one thing that makes money for the university.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think would be interesting. I don't think it will ever happen. Another thing that will never happen, and you already hit on it, go back. It does not need to be 12. It never needed to be 12. I don't think it should have been 4 either. I've always been an advocate of 6 or 8 teams. That's the 8 is the most I've ever seen of, you know what, I can argue for those teams to win a national championship. And it was actually last year. I think there were 8 teams you legitimately could say, if they lined up on the field, could win a national championship. You had the 4 included last year. And then if you wanted to include Georgia, Florida State, Ohio State, and Oregon, I think that's realistic. I think those 8 teams on their best day could have won a national championship. So but that's the most we should have ever had. I totally disagreed with going to 12. I never liked it. I was like this was 5-6 years ago, right after they did it. I was like, why? We don't need that many. We need 6 to 8 at most. So that's where I am. And then also, guys, I think it's an overreaction. So Joel Klatt put this out there, and I agree because you can't disagree with the stats. The average NFL wildcard margin of victory last year was 17.3 points per game. It was 19.2 for the college football playoff. There's 2 points difference, guys. Everyone's just, oh my God, this happened and this happened. And there definitely is a narrative, and I hate to see it because I'm not going to be one of those Texas fans, and I never will be. I said this when we joined the SEC. I'm never going to root for the SEC. I'm never going to be like, oh yeah, SEC. I hate that shit. I never liked it. Yeah. I disagree with it. It's stupid. The only people that do that are the bottom feeders of the SEC because they have nothing else to root for. Mississippi State has nothing else to root for. Kentucky has nothing else to root for. So they chant SEC. So I disagree with that. And they've been arguing, oh, Alabama should have got in over this team or whatever. And listen, do I think Alabama is a better football team than SMU? Yes. Do I think they're a better football team than Indiana? Yes. Do I think they're a better football team than Clemson? Yes. But you also got blown out by Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is not a good football team. But I will say this, and someone pointed this out. If you just go by FPI, which I don't love, but I will say this, FPI so far, guys, has missed 1 bowl game. Every higher-ranked FBI team so far, up until this morning, I don't know what happened today, that team has won the football game. So it does get some stuff right. It's not wrong. Oklahoma would have been Indiana's best win, according to FPI. So these schedules are just completely unbalanced. Like, they're not even close. Like, think about that. Alabama's worst loss possible on that schedule was probably Oklahoma. I'm thinking of the other teams they played in the SEC. I'm not going to say out of conference, but in the SEC would have been Oklahoma. They lost to them. The best win Indiana would have had if they were put on their schedule would have been Oklahoma. That's got to change. That can't be the way we do this sport. It cannot be the way. It's got to be changed. And I put a lot of that on Greg Sankey, on Tony Petitti, because you had 3 years. You knew these teams were coming in for 2 to 3 years, and you said, no, we're going to keep the conference schedule the same. Nothing's going to change. I believe, personally, every conference should play 10 conference games. And then you should have 1 out-of-conference game versus another Power 4 league, and then one out-of-conference game you get to choose. You can choose whatever the hell you want. You want to play Mercer? Go ahead and play Mercer. But that's the way it should be. We have to have some equalization across this field if it really means anything. You can't just have play whoever you want whenever you want, and the schedule would be so unbalanced because of how many teams you have in a league. It helps out if you expand to 10 because then you add 2 more teams. Texas probably this year would have had an Ole Miss, a Tennessee, and Alabama back on the schedule, and that would have helped out their strength of schedule. And then Georgia would have had an easier game thrown into their schedule with the addition of 2 games. So that's got to change.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, if you like, there are like 2. Like that, the sword cuts both ways is what I'm trying to say. That was harder to say than it should have been. But like, do we want to just then rank it off of recruiting rankings? Like, no, right? We don't want to do that. So but if you look at like, I'm a big FEI person. Like the top 6 teams in the FEI, or top 5 teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, Texas, Penn State, right? Top 5 of the top seeds, 5 of the top players. So like, I think this is my most controversial take. I was never somebody that hated the BCS. I thought the formula was okay. It was always a selection size thing for me, right?
Yeah.
I think the computer rankings we're doing advanced stats, right? They're doing what Brian Fremo's doing. They're doing what Bill Connolly's doing, right? We just called the computer rankings because we didn't have the language. So like, I would be totally fine with bringing in some sort of analytic process to even it out. Now, I think there is something to be said about having some human eyes on the game, but balancing it out like the BCS did. The coaches poll shouldn't have been a part of it, right? Because coaches like to judge that thing in the way that benefits them. But like having some sort of, like there are already people that are like taking FEI and S&P Plus and mushing them together and creating a ranking system. And if you look back, this is my favorite thing. If you look back, there's a BCS Know-How. It's one of my favorite Twitter accounts because they do the BCS rankings, and they've been basically spot on with the college football playoff rankings as it stands. So, like, there's something to be said about the system is working the same it always has been. So I really do think, like, in a perfect world, if I could wave a magic wand, we go back to 6 probably is the right number, right? You give the 1 and 2 a bye, 3 through 6 all play in that first round. Like, that would be my ideal fix, but that's never going to happen because there's too much money tied up in it at this point. So I think the other solution is, like, bring in some of these advanced stats, these advanced analytics, tie them with the people rankings, like the committee rankings, just to level the playing field a bit. Because, like, you know what? Indiana was 7th. Alabama was 9th, right? So there's something to be said about that. And looking at FEI, there's something to be said, like, Alabama, the margin for the opponent adjusted efficiency there, not too far apart.
Yeah, and people don't realize when the reason you saw like a Tennessee versus Ohio State blowout is because when that next gear is hit with a team like Ohio State, there's really only 2 to 3 teams in the whole country that can compete with that next gear. And I think Texas is one of them. I think Oregon is one of them. And I think possibly Georgia is. I don't think any other team can compete with that next gear Ohio State hit. And that means those teams would have to hit their next gear too, is what I'm saying. I think Alabama could also do that too if you wanted to throw them in there. The problem is Alabama's floor is so damn low. It's way lower than any of the other teams, but their ceiling is just as high. We saw that in the first half versus Georgia. But that's the balancing act. Do I reward that floor or do I punish that ceiling? So I think it's a combination of two. I don't think Alabama should have gotten in, but if you're telling me if they were thrown in, could they have won the whole thing? Because could they have played to their ceiling 4 games in a row? Possibly. Do I think they would have? No, because they've shown that. They have not shown it at any point during the season, but if they did, they could definitely have won the whole thing. Whereas Indiana, if they played at their ceiling, they're not winning the whole thing.
The team that and lost in all this, team that, if we're talking to 9-3 SEC teams, South Carolina probably had an argument to get in as well. They were one of the top 5 defenses in the country, I think, according to a lot of opponent adjusted rankings. They were really, really good, and they played some of those games without Lenora Sellers, who is going to be. I'm putting my flag in the ground. You can get plus 1,200 for him to win the Heisman next year. Might not be a bad bet. That's all I'm saying. Dude is a baller. So, if we're talking 9-3 SEC teams, they were number 11 in a lot of the top 15, top 12 in a lot of the advanced rankings. So again, there's a reason to bring some of these things in. Now we do have to honor what happened on the field. The regular season has to matter. So lose 3 games, you probably don't deserve a shot at a national championship. So it's one of those weird, the sword cuts both ways situations.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that's why the regular season needs to be fixed with scheduling. That's how it needs to be fixed. If that gets fixed, the college football playoff will take care of itself. Because if everyone is playing 10 conference games, that will balance out the SEC, Big Ten, everyone's schedule. And then if you play one out of conference opponent in the Power 4 that kind of meets up with how good you are, that fixes it too and gives us another data point. So that's what needs to happen. If that happens, I think automatically you're going to get better college football games and more equal college football games just based on what that team deserves at that point. Another thing too, it's kind of weird because the one expansion that does make sense to me, and I heard it on Cover 3, they laid out what a 14-team playoff would have looked like. You would have gotten way better games. So they laid it out. One of the games was Boise State versus Indiana in the first round. Listen, that team probably gets killed in the second round, but that's a really competitive first round game. Yeah. And another first round game was, I believe, Miami versus Miami would have been versus Penn State. That would have been a more competitive game, in my opinion. So you would have gotten more competitive first round games. The issue is, I think you're always going to have an uncompetitive round. Your choice is, do you want it in the first round or second round? I think that's your choice, honestly. I personally would rather have it uncompetitive in the first round, and then from there on out, you get more competitive games. And that's what I'm saying. When we get to the final 4 teams in this college football playoff, you're going to get close games. I'm almost very certain you're not going to get a game with outside of 10 points. I think all those games will be played within 10 points.
And I think the one last thing I'll throw out there is I don't know why we're so anti these blowouts in the first round of this tournament versus the basketball tournament. Y'all, the average margin of victory in last year's first round NCAA tournament was 13 or 14 points. They were not close. I think it was more than half of the games had double-digit margins of victory in the first round. So, like, it's just a weird football thing where, like, we're okay with it in the NCAA basketball tournament, but when it comes to the football game, and I think it's because of the TV product, like, it is built up to be this big thing, and there's fewer games, obviously, so there's a higher percentage of those data points go into it, right? 4 games versus 16 games happening all at the same time, so there's the larger sample size. But again, 13 points. Just looked it up. 12.9 was the average margin of victory in last year's first round of the NCAA basketball tournament. It's like, it is just a tournament thing with seeded teams and these Cinderella type things. And we are eventually going to see, I think, I'm a firm believer that we're going to see one of these weird upsets happen in the first round of the college football playoff, and then it'll be worth the wait.
Yeah, my only issue is the way this set up is the second round, like Texas versus Arizona State. There's a pretty good chance that's a blowout. Same with Penn State, Boise State. So that's my issue is you're creating 2 rounds of blowouts. You need to get that fixed with the seeding and everything. Just have get every blowout if you're going to have one in the first round, and then obviously get it progressively harder, just like a tournament should. It shouldn't be easy, and then hard. It should be easy, easier, medium, hard. That's how tournaments work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the NCAA basketball tournament. 12.9, 11, 10, not like 10, and then 10.4, 10.1, right? Gradually getting harder and harder as they go in. I think the AQs for me, like getting Arizona State getting a bye, like, let's be real, and this is not just me being a Texas fan, like, if we're looking at the way that they're ranked, Texas is the 3rd best team in the tournament because the Arizona State and Boise were guaranteed a bye. Texas has to play in the first round, and now Texas played a more competitive game. But, like, that's part of the issue is getting some of these better teams. Like, again, should Ohio State have had to, or should Penn State have had to play? Like, those are the questions we need to answer. Like, how can we judge the rankings of the AQs to make it a little more equitable?
Well, and also think about this. When this existed, when they created it, Texas was in the Big 12. Oregon was in the Pac-12. So think about who would have got the buys then. It would have been Oregon in the Pac-12. It would have been probably Ohio State in the Big 10. It would have been Texas in the Big 12. And then it would have been Georgia in the SEC. That makes way more sense than the 4 teams that got buys now. Yep. So that's the thing, too. We've created a system that's already outdated. Or we're playing in a system that's already outdated.
Yeah, sure.
So there's so many things they have to correct in it, and I think it will get correct. What has happened in college football in the last 10 years is this sport has changed as much as it has in 10 years as it had the previous 90, guys. Yeah. Like, there was literally no change for like 80 to 90 years. Then all of a sudden this change happened, and a lot of it happened. So I expect it to get resolved. And listen, growing up in life, you think people above you in these high, powerful positions are smarter than you and that they should, think ahead and get everything set up. And then when you get older, you realize, no, they're just as dumb as me. They've just been put in these positions and they're just as incompetent. And they're instead of being forward thinking, they have to be reactionary just like everyone else. So that's what I've learned in my time on this earth. I don't know if Gerald agrees with that or not.
I've got kids. I've learned how smart my parents were more times than I would like to count in the last 7 years. Since my oldest son was born, I've learned how smart my parents actually are, right? Like, and again, as you get older, you realize, like, I'm just figuring this out. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I don't know how the adults just seem way adultier when I was a kid, but I think we're all feeling that way.
Yeah, very few people are revolutionary and they're thinking of, you know what, let's do this before this happens. Most people are very reactionary of, oh, this happened, now we have to do this. So It is what it is. I think it will happen over time. It will be fine. I think everyone gets caught up in the moment and basically doesn't think past their nose and realize, hey, listen, this will get figured out, and in the end, it will be fine. But I will say this too, last point. I will say we will not have any more blowouts in the national championship game or in the Final Four because of this system. So I do think it deserves credit on that because you're weeding out those teams. TCU in the system wasn't going to make the national championship game. Yeah. They could win 1 game and make the national championship game. They were going to have to win 3. That was not going to happen with that team. They were going to lose along the way, and that would have avoided the 65-3. You're not going to get that anymore in the national championship game. I don't think you're going to get that in the Final Four games either. I think they're really going to be competitive football games in the Final Four and national championship.
I'm with you on that, 100%.
So that is the good thing. I will give props on that. So it's going to be interesting. They definitely not ahead of the curve with the auto buy seeding process, in my opinion. No, they're not. And hopefully they will get there. Now, in 3 to 4 years, if they're not there, then I will be pissed off at them because that's plenty of time to fix it. But for right now, I'm fine with it. It is what it is. And I'm super excited if Texas wins. We're going to be playing Oregon or Ohio State. And then on the other side of the bracket, you're probably going to have Penn State versus Notre Dame or Georgia. Like, that's a damn good Final Four, and it's going to be really, really high competitive, fun football to watch. So excited for that. This has been the 34th edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We appreciate you guys for showing up. Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. Also, check out our Twitter or X accounts right there. That is mine, Matthew Miller. And here is Gerald's right there on Twitter or X, along with his podcast that he has. So please check that out as well, the Longhorn Republic pod. And again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. This has been the 34th edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We will be back next week to predict the game for the 35th edition. But before then, please have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, enjoy your time with your family, and we will catch you guys next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And hook.
Merry Christmas and hook 'em.
College football is even more exciting with some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.